um the last class we'll be having, which is Friday, you all will have 1 hour. So actually, I'll send the job offer or job application at the same time. You all we have, I believe I have everybody in the class is as has experience in one role or the other. And I've taught you how to write your CV. I even said, okay, even if you don't have product management experience before, especially if you are just trying to navigate to product management, put the roles that you have before in your resume. Um, but in the description, write about like put terms or terminologies or keywords that reflect um, your leadership skills, your management skills, and some of the things that you've now learned now that probably when you were a software developer, you used to like exhibit those things, but you didn't just know what they were called, right? Now you can put it intentionally in your CV, and then eventually in your resume. So I'll be giving you like a JD, a job description. Everybody, I'll send it at the same time to the group. You have 1 hour to prepare your CV, your cover letter, and every other thing. And then after you've done that, immediately, not after, immediately you do that, what will happen is that you would eventually, what's the word now? After an hour, we would, a couple of my friends will come into the call. I'm thinking maybe 4 to 5 of them. They will come into the call, and then they will have interview with you. So they'll ask questions again, only those that meet the criteria. So if I put your CV in the ATS system, we'll do it together. So some of you will realize that you don't even meet it. Like if I put your CV in the ATS system and the ATS system dumps your CV, boom, bam, it means that you don't even qualify for the interview at all. So if it's one person that qualifies for the interview, I'll tell my friends to join, and then they join. They have interviews with everybody. Every other person will just be on the call, just watching and learning um, the process. For those that will be watching this recording probably after the entire program, when you get to this stage, you will have a link basically to request for live, like to apply as well. And then I'll probably to do the same thing, apply for the same job. And then if you meet the criteria, we'll meet at send you a call to help you learn. All right, so today we'll be learning a bit about behavioral interviews. So, um, behavioral interview is not done in most places or most organizations, but is oftentimes done in big organizations. So if you're applying to the likes of Google, Meta, and all of that, so it's essential that okay, I'll check this again. So it's essential that at the end of the day you understand how things work, right? So I'll try as much as possible to break down some of the frameworks. Some of these I learned outside of my job. Some of these I learned again because of the way I entered my company, a very big company, and this is the biggest company I've ever worked. Um, I did not go through some stages of interview because I was highly recommended by another CEO. But in a scenario where with those people I have actually interviewed, I've had an opportunity to interview in the company, the behavioral interview is always very solid. So I will be teaching you today from the angle, from the POV of a recruiter, like an experienced recruiter or an HR manager. What exactly do they look out for so that you can then infer what you're expected to answer or what you're expected to do in such interviews. All right, so let me share my screen briefly and then I would go through it. So today's class is more of learning than, being hands-on. All right. These behavioral interviews evaluate four major things. Number one, can you think like a PM? Can you use data to make decisions? Have you done this before and learned from it? And can you reason under uncertainty? Again, you need to understand that everything we do as product managers, we do it from the place of uncertainty, right? We don't know what the future would hold. but we have to make enough research to continue. I don't have to wait till I have all the answers. So companies want to know that you can be that person for them. So if you can master these four parts, then your behavioral interview will be very, very seamless. So again, I said, like, number one, can you think like a product manager? We want to see your product sense. Number two, can you use data to make decision? Which we've learned a bit on that. We've learned how this works. You've learned about cohorts. I believe that you guys will go and learn more. And probably, if time permits, one of these days I will actually do a full video. It could be a 5 hours crash course on product analytics, and I'll just share with you guys if, again, I have the time. So you have, can you use data to make decisions? And have you done this before and learned from it, right? I told you guys that um there was an interview. I don't know if it's this class or the other class because I'm also teaching somewhere else. That I had I had an interview, and the guy was more intentional about if I've built a product that I had to decommission, right? It was not very boxed up about the product I built that was successful. You want to learn about the ones that I built that failed. And as at that time, I had never had a product that failed. But now I have products that I decommissioned. And what are the lessons I learned from it? Thousands of them. But the lessons I learned from that particular product is not the same for the lessons that another person learned about decommissioning a feature or a product on their own end as well, like that across board, right? So this is actually very, very essential for you to know. All right. So then the final one is, can you reason under uncertainty? I've explained that. So this is the four major things that usually behavioral interviews assess, right? Remember, I explained to you guys that you have the first call with your recruiter, and recruiter actually checks these four things, but from a high level, right? From a high level, then you have um interview now with the hiring managers or hiring team, and these ones are the ones that actually drill you to know go inside in depth, right? And then after that, you cannot have we call it meetings with the escorts, right? You could eventually now have a call with the CEO. He's still part of hiring team, right? But then it could be broken down into different sections. I explained that at length on Monday, I think, right? All right, so let's go to the first thing I want you to learn, which is product sense, which answers the question, can you think like a PM? We have discussed a lot from day one to now. 6 weeks, like I said, is not, which was eventually broken down into 5 weeks, is not enough really to learn everything there is about products management. So I've actually given you enough to think, right? To build, to learn more on your own. So if you take other courses or try to watch other videos, or you're learning on your own, it's becoming easy for you. So however, one thing that I believe everybody should have understood by now is that as a product manager, you need to learn how to design a system, how to improve the system, and the entire overall strategy around building the system, ideating the next features, gathering data from the customer, you know, moving customer from one end of the funnel to the another end of the funnel, right? We spoke about acquisition, retention, and all of that, right? So that strategy that you play at different instance of the product, right? So product sense questions test whether you think in users problem first, or whether you generate and evaluate solution, or whether you can make clear recommendation under ambiguity. Basically, when the problem is looking very big, if you can actually make clear decision in it. I'll give you an example, right? I've been talking to you guys about acquisition that, by the way, I'm learning a lot because this is my um, first time I'm actually handling a M&A. I've never worked in a company that acquired another company, right? I've been acquired from a company into a new one, but I've never worked in a place where um, we acquired a new company and I have to be part of the process. So I'm learning a lot, right? So now what the company is saying is now we have acquired a company. Imagine we acquired Facebook, right? Facebook is a very big product. Now you need to think about, let's assume our company is Twitter and then we acquired Facebook. And then my CEO says, hey, now we've acquired Facebook. How can we ensure that we merge these two products together so that people don't have to download Facebook separately or download Twitter separately? They download a single application and they're able to use it. I'll give you one of the very, very common example, recent example in the Nigeria system. Providus Bank acquired a new bank. I don't know if we heard about the gist, right? And so far, the Providus cards have not been working fine because of this acquisition, right? They are the one that acquired a new company, like another bank, but they are the one that have been affected. Why is this happening? Because probably the person that is supposed to handle the M&A doesn't have experience with handling M&A, right? And a lot of people had a lot of things to say in the product community that they shouldn't have done this, they should have done that. The crazy part said, okay, so even to use my card as a Providus Bank user, I have to first log in to another app to be able to use my card. It was so strange, right? Things like that. So again, the whole idea of product sense is to gather how experienced you are, right, on some of these things, depending on the job you're trying to apply to. So the first one is clarify scope. When you get to any point, right, before answering any question, always ask them. Always ask question. I think one of the things I teach you guys in this class over and over again is that questions don't make you dumb. It makes you wise, right? The more answers you have, the wiser you get. So don't say, oh, I don't know, these questions might sound very stupid. Ask it. They say, oh, if you don't know this, that means you don't even know anything. It's their problem. Ask questions so that you don't answer and then you're answering off point. Do you understand? Before you answer any question, always ask clarifying questions, especially if you don't understand. Questions like, for example, what stage is the product? They might ask you questions like, oh, we have a product that is not doing well, blah, blah, blah. And then you're like, okay, your product is not doing well. In your mind, you're asking that, okay, your product is not doing well and you have been building product for 5 years. Has he ever done well before? Your mind asked you that question, right? You should ask it. It's a clarifying question. You are asking it in your mind because it would help you eventually answer the question. So ask it. In an interview, usually 2 or 3 is not harmless, right? Ask. The more questions you ask, the more they know you are interested in what they have to say. So please feel free to do that. And also, when you're asked questions about, for example, what you've done or whatever it is, right, or what you will do in the case, make sure that you are very explicit. I've given you several examples. Instead of you going around, use keywords that everybody can relate with, right? You're in a call and then you want to say, okay, some customers stopped using the product, right? You want to use the word churn, right? We had some churn, or for example, a lot of people dropped off, right? Those terms are related to what we say, and then it reduces your capacity of explaining, doing plenty shalaye. Everybody on the call understands what churn is. So say it. If they don't understand, they will ask the clarifying question, and then you can explain, oh, sorry, apologies. When I say churn, what I mean is customers who, do you understand the point, right? All right, identify and segment user. I tell people, right, before you join interview, try and understand this about the company or product that you're trying to build. And then secondly, when they ask you, how would you solve this problem? If you already identify the segment of users they actually, for example, if you want to work with MoneyPoint has multiple products. By the way, MoneyPoint has APIs, which means that they expose APIs for other companies that want to build, but they want to build businesses and they want to use an API, right? So they expose, those are a particular user group. There's another user group like you and I, regular customers who just needs to send money here and there. The money point has that. And then there's another set of group of customer who actually need a place to receive a money like POS that can allow them receive payment and transact payments without all the unnecessary charges that banks will charge on every transaction, right? Another set. And if I want to apply to MoneyPoint, I'll probably research, and I'm sure they have more than 5 different category. So when I go to an interview and they ask me how would you do it, right? I will most likely answer that question understanding the segment of the users that I have, right? Then understand the identify pain points, especially from the conversation that you're having with them, generate solutions. Again, by the way, when you talk about the solutions, always add plans. So one of the things that we do as a product manager is to don't just think of solution. We think of the easiest part to help the customer get the solution faster while not while considering scale. So again, how do I explain it? Let's say you have a solution, right? That solution will take 6 months to implement, right? And then you have another solution. That solution is a very solid solution, but it is going to take a very long time, and you might probably have a lot of churn before that time. So you're like, okay, I have another solution which is like a quick fix. We give the customer. Let me think of a real life example that will probably solve it. Let's assume there's an accident, right? And then somebody probably had a cut, right? And then blood is gushing out. There's a solution you can give at that particular time, at that particular point, which is probably give the person a first aid, right? Find something around to cover it so that the blood doesn't gush out anymore. Something very clean at the same time. Or if you have experience or you have bandage and everything, you can easily just cover it temporarily or find a cloth to cover it. Now, does this solution help you heal that particular person immediately? No, it doesn't. But it's a temporary fix so that you don't lose the person on your way to the permanent fix. I don't know if that makes sense to you guys. So again, this is some of the ways that we think as product managers. We don't just think about the final solution because they want to know, are you that kind of product managers that is thinking of the final solution and then say, okay, but rush them to the hospital, and then you don't care if maybe by the time they get to the hospital, they will die, right? So what can I do right now while I am trying to rush them to the hospital to at least ensure that I can save their life? The same thing applicable to being, if a medical doctor was there, that's what he would think of. As a product manager, your customer is probably having an accident like that as well. Again, in the context of a product. And then they want to know if you are the kind of person that would think, you better take them to an hospital, find a doctor now, and you are a doctor. No, you find something that you can do temporarily, right? I don't know, some of us watching movies, right? So you've seen people maybe they had an issue, they have an attack, and then the doctor says, give me a straw or something, and then they made an incision in their neck, right? And then they put the straw in so that the person can actually breathe before the first responders actually get there, right? Usually, a doctor is the one that will be able to do this. Now, if the doctor does not do that, no matter how fast the responder get there, before they get there, the person would have died, right? So this balance, this is kind of thinking we expect. In the medical line, the example I give right now separates the doctors who think solution than the doctors who think textbook, right? So they don't want somebody that will come and do textbook knowledge. No, you need a the person needs what he needs is clinical injection and something blah 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 blah. And at the end of the day, those injections are not there. So what is here right now that can help, right? So when you think of a solution, especially when they are telling you how will you do this, how will you do that, consider that. You can say, okay, the eventual solution is this, but considering that the customer is actually feeling this pain, the pain is big enough, I think we can probably always just expose an API that will allow them to do X and Y, right? You see, simple stuff. Also measure success, right? Especially when you are giving your solution, think about it that, okay, if this eventual solution will cost us a lot. I'll give you an example, right? Recently, I was building a product that requires it's a fintech product. I was not the one building it directly. A friend of mine was building, and then he needed my opinion, right? So what they are building, Paystack would allow them to build it, but to be able to do beyond 5 million per month transaction, they need to get their CAC and everything done, and their CAC and everything will take a long time, right? At least it will take minimum of 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and their product is ready. They already made a mistake of not making that CAC registration earlier. But he was just building, and eventually he was building, and all of a sudden he didn't know. He sent the product to the communities he belonged to, and people were very, very excited about it. So he was already counting 5,000, and people were coming back to the app and checking it out every time. So he was like, okay, maybe, just maybe, I can actually monetize this app right now, right, without waiting for the CAC document. So I told him that's the wise things to do, right? Paystack allows you to actually monetize right now, and then later on, when you eventually have your CAC, you can upgrade to the user. But the limit is 5 million naira, right? So if you're charged, I asked him, and he said, oh, he's hoping to probably charge maybe 5,000 or 10,000 per month on usage. I was like, okay, yeah, let's try that. And then if you try it, by the time you start reaching 5 million per month, you already know that your product is actually big enough to go and do the registration, right? This is just test. Can you get? So in some cases like that, when you are providing solutions that will be costly for the organization, you probably want to say, okay, I don't think we should just go all out to solve the problem um, in the big way, right? We can solve it in a smaller way, validate that the solution we are providing is actually solving the actual problem of the user. If not, we can roll back and actually do do something else until we find the actual root cause of the customer's pain points, right? Something like that. Just don't go heads on into solution. Think before you answer. That's just the idea. Now, the second part, which I said about metrics, can you make decision about data? So usually in this particular part, when they ask you questions that involves number, so they say, okay, our company just raised some capital, and then we're trying on putting some budget on a new application, blah, blah, blah. It just makes all those fancy number question, right? What they want you to do, or to be able to do, what they are testing of you, is that you are listening and taking notes. So for me, everywhere I go, I've told you guys, I'm always with this. Even if you see me on Sunday morning, you'll see me with this. And I write in my notes, most of my stuff is here, not just um my work notes, even when I'm just randomly, and it's very accessible to me in the room as well. When I'm just randomly thinking about an idea, I write it down. Sorry, give me a minute. I think I have a work message. Yes, I can. Okay, so I was saying something. Yes, so write down, as you are hearing it, write down 200 million. Okay, and then you had a turn of 30%, blah, blah, blah. You write it down like that as you are listening to them. I'll give you a very solid example. When I was teaching you about analytics, one of you funny enough, she's not one of those people that used to come to class every time, because the time that we're having class, she's still on her way home, right? So she watches the class after class. And then she reached out to me and said, Mr. Michael, I was watching this, and then I noticed that you said, um, you mentioned that, what was it about, Seth? I think it was about, freemium, right? I said that if you have between 3% and 4% of 3 to 5% conversion on your freemium, you actually, it's a good number, right? It's healthy. It's an healthy amount. And then she was like, oh, sorry, now I'm very confused. You have 100 people that actually signed up for your freemium plan, and only 3 to 5 people actually converted to paying users. And you say this is healthy, right? I was so happy that she saw it. Nobody in the class asked me that, okay, why is it that 3 to 5 or 6, or I mean, I think I added 3 to 5 or 3 to 10 is an LD amount. If we have 100 people that did freemium for my system, and you're saying that 3 to 10 is the global standard, bro, how is it going on? I now explained to her that yes, this is the global space, right? This is how it works in the global space. So people that do freemium, which is why enterprise companies don't do freemium, right? If you want to use the system, you reach out to support. Support will evaluate if you are even worth it at all before they will even give it to you. Some companies are even worse. Like, they will tell you to fill a form where they ask you how many people is in your company, how many clinical, and then you now submit. Then they are the one that will now reach out to you. If you don't meet that criteria, you cannot even use their system. They don't want anybody to waste their time. But the freemium approach, right? Again, I'm digressing a bit so that you understand what we're expecting from you in an interview, right? The freemium approach, in the other hand, is such that a lot of people will come, like massively, which is what I mentioned when we're talking about acquisition, and that your number of users is not the same as you are doing well. You can have 1 million users per month, like recurring users per month, and your active users is less than 10, right? Why? How do you measure when you are doing a freemium service? How do you measure? And then I asked her, if I'm to ask you sincerely in your circle, right, of friends, how many of your friends actually have YouTube subscription, right? You know YouTube is paid, right? And she said yes. Okay. How many people do you know around you that are actually paying for YouTube? And then she was like, no, none, like no one. And I said, okay, right? I think another person also asked me in class as well. One other girl also asked me the same question. Yeah, I remember. I think it was Constance. I don't think it's a girl. I think it's Constance. So somebody also asked me the same question. These two people are the only one that noticed. Every other person in class, you people don't even go back to materials. Let me just keep quiet. Anyway, like I explained and say, see, just imagine, like, how many people do you know right now that uses YouTube Premium, right? And she was like, no. I said, okay, at least you know one. I use YouTube Premium. I was like, oh, okay, that's nice. That what's the difference? Like, you still can still watch your movie on YouTube. I say you will not see ads. She was like, oh, okay. So, but if I ask her, how many people do you know that uses YouTube in Nigeria or in your circle, right? She'll probably say all. Everybody uses YouTube now, right? So that's how premium works. You have a lot of people that are using it, but only few people are actually eventually converted to paid user. That's why globally the standard is within 3 to 10% thereabout, right? So again, this kind of information, imagine that we are actually in an interview, all of you like this, all of the rest of everybody that did not ask me that question, you have failed the interview, right? Because again, while the person asking you is asking, the person will probably say some things that is expected of you to probably call them back and say, hey, you said earlier this, this, this. In other roles, they call it attention to details, right? So this is what is measured ideally in this particular section of the behavioral interviews, right? So confirm, be very sure, right? And then understand the segments, which of your users where exactly do you have this kind of traffic, right? And all those things, because it matters, right? If a platform has both web interface and mobile interface, and they tell you that, oh, they have more users on their mobile interface than web interface, it is very understandable for a social app, like let's say it's a social media app, like WhatsApp or all of them, they have web interface. But if you say, okay, we have more of our users actually on mobile than web, it's understandable because it's a social app. You're expected to always be on the move. Nobody wants to sit down in their laptop all day just chatting with somebody. I mean, gone were those days when Facebook was like that, right? So again, it matters what platform it is and all of that. I think I'll just go through and then you can take that on your own. Just know that this second part, which I explained earlier, that is the second question. Like, can you make data? Can you use data to make decision? Can you even listen, right? For that decision. And if it's not about listening, if it's about seeing, can you make decision based on this data? Sometimes they give you a spreadsheet and then ask you questions based on it, right? Um, Also, the third part is actually this one. Again, I didn't want to add this one before, but I decided to add it at the end of the day. Um, Hiring managers have two major um what do they call it, frameworks that they use to test if your experience qualifies you for the job you're trying to apply for. So we have the staff framework. Number one, they give you a task, right? And then they ask you how you will do it, right? And then they would evaluate your results to be sure that you actually did it well, right? And then that's basically it. So in most cases, it is used as a practical assessment for developers. They will tell them, okay, build this particular system. And product managers now also vibe code. Like you have a vibe coding session. Remember what we did where I vibe coded the website for one professor like that, right? You might have a call, live call, and they say, okay, vibe code this solution, right? And then you have to choose any platform of your choice, or they specifically tell you have to use Lovable, right? In that particular case, what they are trying to see is you have a situation, vibe code for example, a ride-hailing app, right? They want to see which features you prioritize in the very little time you have. Usually, they can say 30 minutes, right? Considering your token, right? What would you prioritize, right? If you are saying, want you to build a ride-hailing app that allows me to move from here to there, right? And you say, okay, you in particular, or generally can say, okay, that allows me and my organization to move. Because organization is involved, it means that we have to be more specific, which means probably we can remove sign up, right? And just put only login. So which means all the information of the organization, we already have them. We have the emails and everything. We can just onboard them manually, right? That kind of thinking is what they are actually expecting, right? Because if they are building it for their organizations, then there's no point signing up. They already have the database of the, staffs. So why should they sign up again, right? So this kind of thinking, like I said, is what the staff framework allows. So they give you a specific situation and a task, what you should do, and then they observe your actions and eventually also your results. And when I say action, everything you did to get to the result, and then also the results. Um, and sometimes it's not practical. Sometimes it's just questions, right? They ask you, tell me about a time when probably you influenced without authority. Tell me about a time when your life almost ended because of work. Tell me about a time that a customer got very rude to you because of a feature that you pushed out. How did you manage it? Tell me about a time that you actually pushed out a feature and it didn't work well, right? It didn't it didn't land well in production. How did you handle it? Those kind of questions, right? And then there's also SBI framework. It's also a bit similar, but it focuses more on impact, right? So you have situation, the same thing, and then behavior, the same thing as action, and then the impact. The difference between STAR and SBI rather, is that STAR focuses on the actual outcome, right? What you learn, right? While SBI focuses on the impact. What is the consequence of these products that you eventually build? or what is the consequence of the action you eventually take, right? That's what's the difference between them. Usually they use SBI to understand how you handle conflict, right? Oh, your boss, for example, your line manager is a very, very toxic person and is doing this, and you reported to, what would you do? Would you resign? Blah blah blah. All those things, at the end of the day. Also they check if you use, by the way, this I learned this when I was in 400 level. I'll mention her name just to, Hila from Nimota. I was organizing, not even for a level, I think it was 300 or 200 level. I was organizing an outreach to a community, and every time I would say hi, I would like to do this, I would like to do this, and she was like, no, stop doing that. It's not just you, it's everybody. We will. And over time, I started adjusting my constructions to adjust, right? Irrespective of whether I'm the one taking the decision, the team, we, right, became a part of my sentence. So I became conscious of the fact that um, even if I'm the only one that did it and every other person did not do anything, it's our responsibility at the end of the day, right? And that helped me a lot in my 300 and 400 level, right? Because if anything that happens to the class happens to all of us, right? Anything that happens to, so we're able to keep each other in check. And this was something I learned in 200 level, like I said, right? When we went for that outreach. And over time, this has gone with me, even in interviews. They want to hear this as well. Myself and the team would do this, those kind of thought of conversation, like random conversation that looks almost armless, right? Could tell the person viewing if you are going to be an egoistic person or not, right? So this is very important. All right. So in behavioral stuff, what do they want to know? That you influence with authority without authority. You influence with there's a called there's a term that we call influence with so instead of influencing with authority, you influence with your actions, right? I do it first. You guys should do it because I've done it, right? That kind of thing. I have one of my guys still working at this time because he knows I would do the same thing for him, right? So that kind of influence. I didn't have to call him and say, you have to work. I asked him, would you be able to do this today? And then he said, yes, don't worry, I'm here. And then he picked his laptop, right? So this is what influencing without authority means, that I don't have to force him to do it. It's really because he needs to do it. If at the end of the day he feels like I look at it, because he knows sometimes I look at it and say, please go and rest, right? We'll look at this tomorrow. That's what influencing without authority means. Difficult trade-off decision. They want to know, would you be able to make the hard choices when it happens? Failure and learning. What have you learned from your failures and all of that? Yeah. And all of that, you can read them up. All right, and then the final one is estimation. So how, for those of us that are software developers or have written code before, this part might be very good for us because it might be easy for us to know how long things will be done, right? But it's not always that easy as well. So again, going back to where I started from, when you are building a product, your product mindset affects, as developers, or when we see a problem, we think about it from the development perspective. But sometimes a problem does not even need that help. Sometimes it just needs a few changes on the UI and the user is done, right? Sometimes it just needs a few adjustments. Maybe it doesn't need a new interface. For example, um, customers need two-factor authentication, and you say, oh yeah, yeah, I know we just have to implement two endpoints, which is automated verify. Say, why not just do OAuth for them? Probably OAuth will help them more secure, right? This kind of information is what they want to see. So you're able to know what exactly the goal is, be able to break it down into components, and then estimate what each component will actually be eventually. So this is what it looks like. So I don't know if you guys have any questions so far about behavioral interviews generally. If you do, now will be the time to ask. I hope you've learned one or two. Yes.
Okay. Good evening.
Good evening.
So the question I have, like the example you gave the other time,
Mhm.
that if you are a product manager and you are working under a toxic manager, so how will you handle it? So I want to know the right question to that.
What do you say? Okay, like if you're working with a toxic manager, how would you
Yes,
handle it? Yeah,
yes.
there's usually in that particular point you want to have clarifying question, right? Do we have like an approach for that? Do we have a process in the company that handles that? If there's a process in the company that will handle that, I would first of all go through that process. If there's no process, then I would probably suggest to HR that we should probably include such processes or process, whatever you say. Then if there's a process, usually they will probably push back and say, okay, yeah, there's a process, and the process is you report to HR and blah blah blah. So usually there's a there's a conflict management that is expected from product managers. That if I have an issue with somebody in my team, instead of escalating it, I first do a bit of check with that person. So if I have an issue with you, Joseph, I'll reach out to you first and say, hey, Joseph, I don't like this thing that you do. I think it could be done this way. Again, notice the conversation in what I said. I didn't just come and say, oh, you're a bad person, blah, 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 right? I explained how this affects me. Hi, Joseph. There's a way you talk to me that I really don't like. When you talk to me like I'm a child. And I understand that you're my boss, and you have some level of tone that you can use to address me that I will appreciate. And yet, this I don't. However, I would suggest that, for example, in a case where this happened, you give an example. I would expect that as an amazing leader that you are, you will do this or that, right? Clear instances. Now, if you've given update to this person, after the conversation, if the person is open to the conversation and they say, oh, okay, I didn't know, thank you so much for the feedback. And again, if you present it well, probably the feedback is good. And then it's okay, we'll work on it. So do you want me to tell you when you are doing it? If the person says, yeah, yeah, anytime I do it, just tell me, just give me this look, right? And I will tell you that works a lot. That works a lot. Um, one thing that after saying that, like after telling them that, okay, this is what you do that ideally the way it is expected. After you've spoken to them, you give the person at least some time to adjust, right? Which means they will still do it once or twice after that, and you would mention it to them. If it doesn't change, then you are free to escalate. Now, if you had the first conversation with them and they don't change, right? Let's say you have the first conversation with them and they're like, who are you to be telling me how to treat you? In that particular point, you can escalate to their boss. And then during your escalation, you would specify that, again, this is not to spite anyone, it's just to be able to, you are writing that email to HR just in case HR can find a way to actually converse with them. And I'll tell you why this is very important. I know this is not related to what we are talking about, but the reason why this is very important is because in case this person raise up a case against you, maybe for them to sack you, that you're not getting the job done, the case you have raised against them earlier about the fact that they are toxic, they don't present, and you've given an example, would actually balance up whatever the situation is. I have one of my mentees that just dropped a resignation in one company, and then she just got another company, right? In Nigeria here. She moved, like she literally dropped the resignation the day she collected her salary. I was telling her that she's very petty, right? But she did the same thing. She escalated to everybody. She told everybody, and then nobody was doing anything about it. HR was not doing anything about it. So she started applying for job. She got a new job, and then she dropped her resignation. Everybody called her, including the CEO. Why? Why are you resigning? Why are you doing this? Why did they call her? because they've seen a lot of trails of escalation, right? With examples. She has given examples to a lot of people. So when they called her, it wasn't, oh, why did you? He said, is it because of him? Don't. In fact, they even told her to the point that this guy will soon be leaving in the next month. That don't leave because of him. You will most likely even be the next person that will be, mentoring the next level, blah, blah. Blah, she's not interested, right? The reason why it was easy for her, the reason why the company was begging her, is not just because she was good at her job, well, but because they had context even before the resignation was dropped. She didn't even write it there that she resigned because of her team lead. But everybody had context. Everybody knew that the guy was treating her like trash. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? So I think it's a balance. So when you're asking that question, you want to answer first, ask clarifying questions just to answer your question. Number one, ask clarifying questions. Does the company has, you know, a process in place for that right now or not? So let's say the company does not have a process. Okay, if the company doesn't have a process, personally, I have a process, and my process is I try to talk to this person about it. I don't shy away from problems. I talk to the person. This is how I feel about the way you relate with me, and if the person does not agree, then I would escalate to the necessary authority, because if my mind is not in the right frame of work, I cannot actually deliver on what I'm promised. But if a person agrees, then we can work together, see if it improves. If it doesn't improve, I'll escalate to him one more time before I finally escalate to people's operation. Right? This is the ideal process. Do you understand, Joseph? Or does that,
Uh,
does that answer your question?
yes, it does. So then I have one more question.
Yeah.
So you there's another example you give that